Hello, my name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the editor with My Security Media. This is episode 6 in our Security and Risk Professional Insight series, looking at advancements and applications for critical infrastructure protection and high security environments. This ticks off on our drones, robotics and autonomous systems as well. So definitely hitting on AI and a deep dive into AI. I'd like to welcome our panel today, Greg Sadler, CEO with Good Ancestors Policy, with the Australian for AI Safety, SYGO, there in Kuala Lumpur. Greg's in Canberra, by the way. SYGO, who welcoming back from KL, and he is the ISACA Emerging Trends Working Group and also Head of Compliance with Advanced AI. SY, thanks for joining us again. Shannon Davis, based in Melbourne, Principal Security Strategist with Splunk Surge. Dr. Mahendra Samarawikrama, he's the Director of the Centre of Sustainable AI. Mahendra, he's in Sydney. Mahendra, it's great to have you on. We've been talking about having you on for so long, so it's great to have you joining us. And from Adelaide, Lana Tikhom-Ivarov, PhD candidate with the Australian Institute for Machine Learning with the University of Adelaide. Lana, thanks also for joining us. We'll come back to the panel. Just as a brief introduction, this session is recorded. We'll go for at least 60 minutes. Audience questions are welcome, and the Q&A throughout. So even if you wanted to interrupt with a question, otherwise we'll get to them at the end as well. As I mentioned, this will be available tomorrow at the latest. Thank you to our sponsors, our national sponsor, Curtin University, our series sponsor, Security Exhibition and Conference, Davcor with their EKI Cyberlock and Ever Access to Security. And it's also been supported by the Australian Security Industry Association Limited, or ASIAL, ACES International, and the Australian Institute of Professional Intelligence Officers. This follows on, for those that have been throughout the series, a national series of events in person. It's all leading up to the WA Space Week and the Indo-Pacific Space and Earth Conference that we're running in Perth in November, alongside the 30th Asia-Pacific Regional Space Agency Forum. For those in Sydney, on the 30th of October, we're doing a cross-sector applications for remote operations and robotics with REM Hub and the Australian Centre for Robotics in Chippendale. That's again on the 30th of October. And we've got Lieutenant General Larry James, retired. He used to be the Chief Operating Officer with NASA JPL in California. He's now with the SmartSat CRC and Professor with Monash University. So looking forward to that session. This also follows on a session we ran last week, Australia and India, Space and Technology Opportunities for Collaboration. That is available on demand. And we're doing a CISO and hacker series with BugCrowd. And we'll touch on bug bounties on the AI surface, and BugCrowd have some AI bug bounty services available. So again, quite relevant to today. And then later tonight, we've got our virtual awards for the Top Women in Security ASEAN region. That's at 7 p.m. Singapore time, again, with our top 30 women in security. I'll be in Singapore next week for the awards there in relation to the Top Women in Security ASEAN region. And then we've got on the 7th of October in KL. This is now a finalist. The Testing Tech in Paradise series is a finalist with, I can't remember who it was with now, but it's received an award, finalisation for a government partnership series. So Testing Tech in Paradise, that's still available on demand in terms of live testing and new developments on the Sunshine Coast. And then I won't go through all of these, but as I mentioned, episode 6. So episode 5, we looked at security planning and response. Episode 4, we looked at OT, cybersecurity. And then episode 3, we had a live session in Melbourne as well. And then episode 1 and 2, we kicked off in April. So it's all there on demand in terms of this series, and hence why we're going to keep it relatively broad today in terms of AI, ML and automation, and aligning safety and cybersecurity. We're going to kick off with Greg. I'm going to get each of the panelists just to introduce what they're doing and their domains. Each are quite unique, but hopefully bringing them together, you'll get a good update on terms of what AI is and where we're at in terms of AI applications and some of the safety and cybersecurity applications and guides that we are getting, including today out of Australia, a new set of guardrail or a discussion paper on guardrails as they move towards a legislative framework. Greg, we'll start with you. Just maybe a 30-second introduction to who you are. I'll get you all to introduce yourselves, and then we'll come back to you in terms of the good ancestors. But Greg, just a brief introduction.
Yeah, thanks for the intro, Chris. So as you said, I'm Greg Sadler. I spent about 15 years in the Australian public service, like broadly working at the intersection of like tech and national security issues, and did some time in Parliament House as well. And so I've left a couple of years ago to start this charity called Good Ancestors Policy. We're asking what policies could governments put in place that would sort of make us be seen as good ancestors to future generations? Like, what are the really big issues that we're facing, and what policies can we do to tackle them? So that's it for introductions, but I'm happy to talk more about like what I see coming in AI, like dangerous capabilities that we're thinking about, and these sort of regulatory points that Chris alluded to.
Nice. And you've got a call out for Australians for AI Safety, or a safety institute here in Australia. So we'll come back to you on that, given what's happened today. SY Go, I think, again, the frameworks with ISACA, most of our audience will know you via ISACA, but your current role?
Hi, thanks for the invite again, Chris. I'm currently managing the compliance in my current company, Advanced AI. So we provide AI-driven solutions for identity verification checks, primarily around the KYC and KYB industries, know your customers, know your business kind of industry space. Aside from that, I'm actually on the ISACA Emerging Trend Working Group. So one of the pillars, of course, no surprise, will be on the AI side, which I'm heavily involved in, and happy to share more later on in our chat with some of the work that ISACA have done.
Nice. And referring back to ISACA Sydney chapter, they did a session last week on embracing the intersection of responsible AI and cybersecurity. I've got some of the slides from that session that I'll refer to, particularly on the frameworks and standards. Shannon Davis, next on my list with Splunk Surge. You were the one that kicked off this particular series for me from what came across my desk in terms of the research that your team has been doing on large language models.
So no pressure there, Chris. Thanks for the intro. Yeah, my name is Shannon Davis. I'm a principal security strategist within Splunk Surge. Surge is one of Splunk's security research teams. And we just recently, over the past 6 to 8 months, conducted a relatively large research project around LLM security and how do you actually secure your own LLM applications. So I think that kicked that off. Kind of forgive my accent. I'm in Melbourne. Been here since 2001, originally from Seattle, and I'm not going to go through my entire background. It'll take way too long. But yeah, that's me.
Nice. And yeah, everyone's antecedents are on the website as well. But we will come back to you as well, Shannon, in terms of that. You're doing it the other way, right? So the applications of large language models, how you secure them themselves before you apply them, right?
Correct. Or once you actually do apply them, and more the operational side of the LLMs themselves.
Right. And Mahendra, I can't keep up with you. You're better off telling us what you're currently doing. And I don't know if you've got live research on, but I know that you've taken on a few AI roles for enterprise to start to guide and help them.
Thank you, Chris. So the Center for AI, since it's established, working with national and international organizations to like supporting establishing standards for AI governance, ethics, and then we later evolved into multiple emerging technologies, because AI is no longer a silo. It is tightly integrated with cybersecurity and some of the emerging technologies like robotics, drone, and some of the cognitive services. So the Center for Sustainable AI role is like supporting enterprises, national and not, especially not-for-profits and government organizations to like establishing their framework for governance and best practices. And we are closely working with some of the leading organizations like Harvard Business Review, IEEE, and the evolution of the standards are quite critical these days because of this generative AI and emerging risks. So we support actively to adapt and integrate this into the enterprises.
Nice. Well, we'll come back to you, NSY, in terms of guidance on what standards to follow. Seems like everyone's kind of issuing guidelines and standards and frameworks, and it's hard to know which one to go by. EU seems to be the main one. And Lana, you came across my desk sort of early last week when I saw some of your research has just been sort of announced in what you're doing. So you're a PhD candidate there in Adelaide.
Yes, so I'm a PhD candidate at the Australian Institute for Machine Learning. So I mainly look at AI safety from a human decision-making context. I have a background in cognitive science, cognitive psychology, human factors, and more recently looking at bioethics. So we usually look at safety as applied to AI models in medical contexts, but we also kind of extrapolate away from that and look at sort of best practice for understanding AI in high-risk contexts for decision makers.
That was the term. I just looked at my notes. The AI chasm. Maybe can you explain that in 30 seconds?
Yeah, sure. So basically in medical AI, in around 2018, 2019, when we started having an uptake of deep learning models in clinics, we started to find that they were giving us adverse outcomes. There'd be unintended consequences of AI algorithms. They made strange errors, or even they just didn't seem to fit the environment that it was going to. And so that started to be called an AI implementation gap, where models don't really reach the bedside anymore. They weren't being tested for properly. And then that kind of got turned into a chasm because the gap was deemed so wide that it needed a bigger name. And that's still an ongoing issue. And yeah, it's part of what my work tries to address.
Just to cover off, that is how humans interact with the AI. Is that it? That was the chasm in terms of the gap?
Yeah, well, we, in our work, we see that the gap kind of continues on because we're not addressing the human-machine relationship adequately. It's also just a general over-reliance on technical benchmarks, not actually looking at meaningful clinical benchmarks. And I think that's a principle that also exists outside of medicine. So looking at benchmarks that are relevant to whatever application you're using is far more important than just an AUC or some sort of precision recall curve on an algorithm. So yeah.
It sounds very much like, and we'll come to Greg now in terms of sort of the policy, but it sounds a little bit like to me where we're currently at, and that's why I included safety and cybersecurity. It sounds a little bit like the discussion we have around IT and OT cybersecurity, because there's the safety implications for humans, and then there's the cybersecurity implications for the technology. Greg, is that almost where we're heading with this? And particularly when you're looking at a safety institute for AI, the operational technology is how AI will actually affect a human's, psyche and safety, versus AI applications and how they can be poisoned, attacked, and it's almost a data-driven attack with less implications. Yeah, just your current focus, and again, some of the guardrails that came out today that sort of guide us on what this terminology is.
Yeah, for sure. So, obviously, there's a big national and global conversation about how we should think about regulating AI, and what too little regulation would be and what too much regulation would be. So, as you said, we've seen government today drop sort of two different things. So the first is this voluntary AI safety commitments, or a sort of voluntary standard that organizations are sort of being encouraged to pursue. And the second thing is this consultation about mandatory guardrails. So one's a voluntary scheme and the other is a proposed mandatory scheme. And the discussion paper, obviously it's only been out for a few hours, so I haven't read every word of it yet, but it's sort of drawing on this distinction that we've seen come out of the EU and a little bit from Canada between high-risk AI use cases. So I think this is the kind of thing that Lana's talking about, where you're talking about AI in medical devices or other situations where these risks that could have acute threat to human lives arise. But it's about a specific use case intended for that AI by the developer or the deployer or even the user. And then there's this other bucket that Canada calls a general purpose AI model, or the EU AI Act calls a general purpose AI model with systemic risk, where you're talking about highly capable future AI systems that could present these kind of novel risks, whether that's empowering misuse, so kind of becoming a cyber weapon or enabling terrorists to produce bioweapons, or even kind of loss of control, causing a sort of a catastrophic accident for some sort of like superhuman agentic AI in the future. So you've got these two streams of risk, which might map on a little bit to what you and Lana are talking about. So I guess that's where we're at in a regulatory model. I guess maybe going a few steps back, I guess if I was giving general advice to people, I think it seems as if we're on this sort of rapid AI growth trend. And if you sort of look at where we are today and you sort of focus too much on the current capability, I think you're going to miss the way this growth trend is continuing.
Yep.
So absolutely, you should be looking forward to the future and the growth trend. I saw a report recently that argued that we don't think we're going to run into any sort of hard bottlenecks on data availability or compute or algorithmic improvements until about 2030. So the roller coaster that we're on continues. And maybe the second point would be if AI is going to keep having like more capabilities come online and more of these capabilities are going to hit human or superhuman levels, we should be ready for some of those capabilities to be pretty weird and unexpected, which could have just hard to predict impacts, which will have impacts for a regulator because you've got to be ahead of those things, but also impacts for business. And I guess like just my final thought would be, so that sort of comes back to the work that I'm doing at Good Ancestors and Australians for AI Safety. We're sort of encouraging governments to say, we need to take these really big risks seriously and do the work like AI safety institutes to take these really big risks off the table so that the public isn't worried about these things. And then we can have a business environment that can thrive, that can get all the benefits of AI because government takes these big risks seriously.
Okay, well, I'm going to come to SY and Mahendra next. In terms of, because we can't do it alone, right? It's a little bit like the grappling what we've got with social media, even cybersecurity. We are held to what the international frameworks are. It's not like Australia's inventing this technology. It's all coming out of US and China and the like. And we are only either adapting or responding to it. Maybe SY first. Is there, and there are some ISO standards. There's 39794 16, which is defining AI. Then there's the branch, there's 2382, and then there's also 22989 in terms of defining AI. Does it come down to a classification system? So we need to understand what that AI is rather than just this general term, a bit like anyone who hates the term cybersecurity. It's very much like that with AI, right? We've lost the understanding of what this AI is, and we need to come back to a classification.
Yeah. The surprising thing is actually AI has been in place for quite a number of years. I think what created this increase in this space was due to the ChatGPT, right? And the Gen AI type of genre AI category. But I think everyone should be aware that there are various type of AIs that have been implemented for many years, such as machine learnings, deep learnings, neural networks, natural language processing, NLPs, and whatnot. So those are the types of AIs that are powering some of the solutions that have been in use by many enterprises these days already. What's interesting from the regulations side of things is that it covers all types of AI. Take, for example, the EU AI Act. I think a lot of people have read about it, which came into effect mid of this year. And then it categorizes the type of AI systems. In a way, I personally would agree with that kind of approach whereby it categorizes it by risk, right? So for those that are dealing with highly sensitive types of data that's powering the AI system, then it could be a sensitive or high risk type of systems, and that requires further regulations or further controls that needs to be put in place, especially in systems that deal with biometrics and then personal data like the facial recognitions and your thumbprints, or even your your eye
Iris.
iris. Yeah, correct. So those type of regulations are pretty much coming out from the EU, and then you have US as well that has proposed their version of the safety bills, AI safety bills. I think from the ASEAN perspective also, we are seeing that there's progress being made recently as well. The question is where are the meeting points between all these regulations? Would there be some countries that are more stringent, some that have already taken steps many years back to kickstart their AI initiatives or AI regulation initiatives, such as China as well, from this region. Singapore and Australia, as we are pretty much familiar with, I think they are also they have kickstarted that. And what complicates things even further is that on top of the regulations from the country and the regions, you have also certain industries, specific industries like the FSIs, financial services, that have taken their own steps to start regulating on their own. So I think at this moment, everything is still in limbo. There is, however, the impression that I'm getting is that a lot of it are still in a guideline, high level overview, rather than going into more prescriptive. Perhaps it's due to the types of AI coverage that we are dealing with, like what I've mentioned earlier. We have multiple types of AI, right? The machine learnings, the neural networks, and whatnot. So to have a more prescriptive ones, I think that would take time, and hence why I think it is a step ahead. But for organizations, enterprise looking into this type of areas in the compliance space for the types of AIs that they are deploying, it will still be quite, I guess, a noisy space for now. Yeah.
Yep. Well, and that was my only concern with this particular session, is creating noise. But I wanted, at least it allows us to deep dive into it, and I get a better understanding of it too. I always think the audience is, if I'm finding it interesting, I imagine some of the audience are like, yeah, okay, we need to dive into it. Mahendra, I think the other one is, from your perspective, where we're currently at, there's still an opportunity here for the auditing and the risk professionals, because it is, even with the guidelines coming out today, you need to do a risk impact assessment, or the AI impact assessment. There's a privacy impact assessment. So there is opportunity there right now for risk professionals. One of the feedbacks from ISACA last week was there's no real set certification standard just yet for risk professionals to say, yep, I'm an AI certified auditor, or I'm an AI certified cybersecurity professional. How do we go about it? Is this the opportunity here now for security and risk professionals to take on that role of evaluator? And we'll come back to Shannon after this in terms of the research and how they do their research with the cybersecurity hat on. But how do you approach it? You take that risk-based approach?
Yeah. So when we looking into this, how this landscape evolved, initially everyone like if you go like 4 or 5 years back, a lot of people talk about responsible AI, which is quite voluntary frameworks. For example, United States particularly, they didn't go into regulatory perspectives. They have NIST, AI risk management framework, which is quite a voluntary framework. At the same time, I know there for cybersecurity specialists, they also has a NIST cybersecurity framework. So the regulatory framework comes with a risk appetite. Now, over time, what is happening is like with AI, the data particularly, there are also significant risks for privacy violation and deep fake, and leaders identified like there should be a significant governance. So there is this aspect is quite complex, because AI is a quite enabler for economics perspective, and different countries also have different mindset on AI. For example, we can't blame anyone, but if you're looking into different countries, they have different risk appetite. So if one country put highly regulatory framework for AI, they might get disadvantage. Now that is where this should be carefully handled. Now we saw like how the GDPR emerged for data governance. like if we looking into AI or cybersecurity, there are intersection on data, like because after all, they all information systems where it can be boiled down to data, people, hardware, software, and processes. So what is happening now, since data is like an intersection pillar, now data governance is very important for the quality of the both services like AI and cybersecurity. Now, we have seen how regulatory frameworks emerged and established that quality. For example, GDPR is considered as a golden standard for data privacy and security and governance, which play a significant role on like as a mandatory regulatory framework. Now, in the similar way, for algorithms and like more specific AI perspective, now EU AI Act is emerged. Now, I think these regulatory perspectives are important, but risk is not the only, for your question, risk is not the only way of looking, because we all know as leaders, the ethics play a significant role. Now, ethics and governance is the main focus. And in that perspective, sometimes sustainability, ethics can play a role on these governance and best practices. Like, for example, there are United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, responsible AI principles, which mainly focused, not mainly focused on risks only. They focused on health and well-being, fairness, social justice, so many areas. At the same time, some framework, for example, particularly because of world know the impact of EU AI Act, which highly aligned with risk management. Now Australia is now talking on not only responsible AI, but safe and responsible AI. This safe term is like recently added to our vocabulary in the AI, which promoted through this EU AI Act, and which we know, which make a significant, and organizations should be like familiar and aligned with that future emerging regulatory framework.
I think it's a good point. Yeah, I think it's a good point in terms of the terminology changes a little bit. Safety definitely coming in. You mentioned responsibility and ethics, but now safety is coming in. What we might do, given just on time, I'm going to move to Shannon, then we'll come to Lana, just in terms of their research. I think, Shannon, we'll come to you if you're ready, just to talk us through your LLM research that you did, and then Lana will come to you. These are two, maybe not polar, but they're very two distinct forms of research within AI, and then we'll kind of follow up with a general discussion applying some of this terminology and standards. But yeah, Shannon, Splunk Surge and your LLM sort of research into the applications for cybersecurity.
Yeah. So we first started off trying to look and see what sort of security practices could be applied to these various LLM applications that are being developed. We saw a couple instances, or maybe a few instances in the past year, where kind of homegrown applications that companies were building to make use of large language models were being exploited. I think there was one for an airline in Canada where the person was able to do prompt injection with a LLM-based chat bot and get it to, I can't remember if it was a refund that they shouldn't have gotten. There was a car dealership in the US where the person got the chat bot to sell them a car for $1 through a prompt injection. And then we saw, I think it was about 8 months ago, ChatGPT, where it started actually serving up other people's chat histories to users that shouldn't have been seeing that. And we wanted to find a way to help defend these applications that the companies were putting out there without proper security guardrails in place. We've talked about a number of frameworks already today, and that's what we found as well, that there were countless frameworks being put out there for different purposes. One that we found that was quite good was the OWASP Top 10 for LLM-based applications. People may be familiar with OWASP, the Open Worldwide Application Security Project, quite a mouthful. They've been around for quite a while, and they've done quite good work. Their top 10 was very, very succinct, and we wanted to find which ones companies could easily adopt and make use of, And we were able to do the 5 of the top 10 with just the prompts, what users type in or what users request of one of these applications, along with the responses that come out of these applications as well. And that's what we based our research around, were those 2 bits of data that companies could very easily get from their applications. This can then apply as well if you're gathering the information from the likes of ChatGPT or other commercial applications that your organization may be using, to then audit the use of those applications as well. And we found quite good results through the research.
Interesting. So you can use that to audit these systems as well, right? Okay.
Correct.
I think that's
yeah.
the biggest challenge I view as of how you audit an AI, and you would take it through various sort of frameworks and set tests. Are we at that stage already now where you can follow a test procedure?
You can, to evaluate the responses and how that actual model's behaving. Even the creators of the models, that they admit themselves that it can be quite difficult. They're essentially black boxes at the end of the day for even them. Anthropic, so one of the big companies that's been developing a lot of this, they released some research. They were able to infer a lot of the behavioral aspects of their own models through some quite novel techniques. What we're doing is more around the likes of, PII, so personal identifiable information, insecure output that could be impacting either the users or the backend systems, depending upon which direction that data is flowing. And then, like I mentioned, the prompt injection, which most people are aware of, is kind of the front and center one, where people are getting these tools to do things that they're not really designed to do.
One question I would have, was there any look, and you probably, I don't know what the answer is, but how much testing they did before release? Before they released these chatbots and the like, were they testing for these prompts, or was it they just made assumptions that it works, let's release it? There was obviously vulnerabilities there.
I can't answer for any of the companies that actually built these. Obviously, the big ones probably did do comprehensive testing in the back end, but I'm sure there's the full gamut of ones that have just used either off-the-shelf models that they've built their applications on top and haven't tested. We have seen ones where responses have then released training data, like full email contents, back to users, which then we can pick up with some of the research that we had done to find things like email addresses or other easily identifiable patterns that come out that maybe shouldn't come out.
Okay, well, it's something we've had a chat to BugCrowd and their team, and they're now creating a AI bug bounty sort of crowdsource of hackers. And I think there's no excuse now for AI to be released like that with known vulnerabilities, at least setting it out with a bug bounty program. Lana, let's come to you. And again, a PhD candidate looking at med tech, a little bit more implications for direct human safety, particularly when we've done sessions on computer-brain interface and the like. Maybe talk us through and take 5-10 minutes if you want, to walk through your research.
Yeah, sure. So I guess when we look at safety, there's, I guess, 2 angles, or typically there's been the technical angle and there's the socio-technical angle. So when we look at AI errors and the sorts of unintended designs and consequences and poor generalization to data, hallucinations, all that sort of a thing. But what my work really focuses on is that sort of idea that actually when we're looking at safety, almost all of the time we're looking at what happens when the algorithm goes to a human, usually a human decision maker. So whether that be a medical imaging model, text-to-image diffusion model, or a large language model, they're going to have to pass through a human, and that would be a human cognitive system as well. So when we look at experts, for example, the ways that humans or doctors specifically might think is incredibly different to an AI algorithm. The fact that it's a statistical model that's primary, I guess, goal is to optimize data. It's very different to the goals of that of a clinician. And that might be similar in other applications of when humans are using AI. So we need to get really specific about the use cases in which it's kind of okay to offload to an AI algorithm, or the ways in which I guess an algorithm could augment a certain cognitive process. And then there's also needs to be specificity about the areas in which AI might not be actually improving a decision, whether it's lengthening it or whether it's actually just leading to more errors and things like that. And so the way that we sort of look at safety in that way is sort of trying to understand use within that human socio-technical system. Because as we know, AI algorithms are not perfect. A lot of the times because they don't think like a human, and there's a lot of, I guess, mystery around the decision processes that they use, we can't over-rely on these technologies. And even if it is accurate to an adequate degree, or if we know that it performs well, if we've tested for it properly, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually going to give the intended, I guess, application that you want it to. So in a healthcare context, you might have a model that operates on 95% accuracy. It might outperform doctors on predicting some sort of clinical deterioration, but you might put it in some sort of a setting like that and find that it actually doesn't improve patient numbers. That's because there's an existing system of users and infrastructure, and it has to integrate into that. Some sort of examples we see of how humans, I guess, might make mistakes with AI is something like automation bias. So over-relying on AI, not being vigilant enough to see errors or to understand when an algorithm might not be producing the best information for the task. That's especially dangerous in a medical context. Obviously, we don't want to be missing cancers because an AI algorithm did. But I think the challenge there is actually because the errors that it makes are rather unusual, because it doesn't think in the same way as a clinician. So they're harder to anticipate. Another sort of potential harm is, I guess, models training the human. In this space, there's a lot of talk about trust. I don't usually like trust as a concept because I don't think that it's the best way of looking at human AI interaction. I'm more interested in calibration because a doctor can say that they trust an AI algorithm and not use it at all. Their behavior can be very different. And some of the times we don't want a doctor to fully trust an AI. We actually want the right amount of trust. We want them to use it when it's helpful and when it's right, and we want them to not use it when it might be making a mistake. And that's actually calibration. So you need to be well calibrated to the system. But there's very little information and research on that. That's something that I try to look at. Another area of, I guess, misuse is actually around explainable AI. So I know that we have a lot of regulatory frameworks that focus on explainability. Obviously, it's a really nice idea to be able to have AI algorithms that can explain clearly how they've come to a certain decision. But then you look at things like large language models or ChatGPT, which has trillions of parameters. Explainability is just not an option. And even if you can, in an imaging model, for instance, get some sort of explanation, it's usually just an approximation of what may have happened. It's not actually necessarily the hard truth. And even apart from that, there's a lot of research in cognitive psychology showing that explanations in AI algorithms might actually worsen decision-making. They may not improve accuracy. On a qualitative level, people would rather have AI algorithms that are highly accurate than explainable. So what we see is sort of the efforts put into safety from the human perspective are somewhat misguided. There's a lot of, I guess, misunderstandings that have sort of prevailed in that field. So part of what I do is I try to, I guess, untangle those sorts of misconceptions about humans, about AI algorithms, try to talk about the ways in which humans, our cognitive systems, our brains are very efficient. The sorts of information that we choose and that we use in making decisions is very different to that of an AI algorithm. We are much more frugal with the information that we use. We only need a few pieces of important information to very quickly know what to do. We don't even necessarily have the ability to explain why either, but we have very different ways of using information than an AI algorithm. So that has a lot of potential in the sense that, you might get pixel level data from an imaging model that the human eye can't see, and that might be, for example, really effective in predicting some sort of a tumor. But I think no matter what, when you're looking at safety, you have to keep looking at that socio-technical system. And part of what I look at as well is sort of testing paradigms. We have something called the silent trial in the medical safety sphere. So we try to run AI models on hospital data for a period of time, see how they actually perform, get them to be evaluated by clinicians that are separate to the people working in that particular part of the hospital, and see what happens to performance, see how it performs on different ethnicities and different socioeconomic groups of people. And I guess have that sort of guardrail for safety before it goes to a human. And then what I'm wanting to build on to that sort is to look at, I guess, what you might want to look at when you're testing and trialing an algorithm for human decision making. And so for that, I guess it's just gathering the right evidence, using the right testing paradigms. If you want an AI algorithm to reduce cognitive load for people working in a business, well, how are you going to measure that? Is it going to be the right measure? And can you get evidence for that? So that's a sort of work that I look at from the human perspective. I hope in the future that it can make some sort of influence in the regulatory sphere, but everything moves very fast, and as we've been saying, there's a lot of different frameworks all the time.
Well,
so
I think, again, all of the language and the way that you're applying that has very, very much aligned to security, public safety, military applications. It's that life and death process. And I think also the humans are lazy, right? So if it starts making decisions and it's right half a dozen times, we'll just assume, oh, it's right from there on. We're not going to be checking it and verifying that. So there's a really good, trust is a good one. We use that a lot in cybersecurity. I think calibrating is a good term. Hallucinations is another good term to be aware of in terms of seeing things. We do a lot with facial recognition surveillance. There's a lot of AI being applied in the surveillance aspect, video surveillance aspects, crowd monitoring. Starting to apply AI models there. And you mentioned the socio-technical aspects of that. What was this, just for mine, silent testing? Was that silent testing was the term?
Yeah, so silent testing or silent trials.
Okay. Well, look, anyone in the public safety security aspect of that, all of that thinking is very much relevant to what we're doing. Shannon, does that ring true to you? I mean, would you say that you're in the socio-technical aspect? You are, in a way, given how humans are interacting with large language models.
Yeah, and a lot of that kind of resonated. It was similar to what we see as well in terms of the use of these tools. So a lot of companies are trying to push these tools to help augment lower level staff, and I'm completely against that, because usually those kind of newcomers to whatever their craft may be can't pick up when these tools are either hallucinating or are incorrect, versus somebody who's very experienced, whether it be medical or cybersecurity or others, would be able to potentially see that a lot easier. So I think the augmentation of more experienced individuals tends to be an area where they make more sense. And then same thing in terms of a lot of the biases and other things that we're seeing come in, especially if that training data isn't is too opaque. Then that can definitely impact the results that you get. I could see that from the medical side, that if it is, different people from races and genders and whatnot can have different results. Same thing in the cybersecurity realm, where if, like you mentioned, if you think it's right, or you see it being right 4 or 5 times, and then just automatically trust, and if it's potentially a different adversary that you're encountering or something else, you really need to be on your toes with these things. And our main areas of improvement have been that augmenting what you're already kind of good at, and kind of a force multiplier in your day-to-day job.
I think the other one is being quite specific on what you want it to achieve, a bit like code in, code out, or input output rather than just assuming and applying it to large bodies of data and hoping for the best. Mahendra, you talk about cognition as well and the psychology. I take it that comes into the way, in fact, most of the presentations I've seen you talking about seems to be talking about human psychology and cognition. You're on mute, just in check.
So yeah, that's correct, Chris. It's a little bit complex topic, the consciousness, because the consciousness play a vital role in modern day understanding of not only the AI but also the fundamental physics. So there are branches like easy problem of consciousness, but most of the time we are tackling like how our through brain MRI data correlate, how the decision makings behaviors correlates with the human data. And that's the easy problem of consciousness, what most of the time psychologists looking into. At the same time, there is a hard problem of consciousness where people think consciousness has nothing to do with the brain, and consciousness become fundamental. And that's a interesting topic that going into more deep into this.
I think it's probably why we hear Elon Musk talking a lot about consciousness as well, given what they're doing with computer brain interfaces and the like. And I think the other one is, as Lana was talking, just on how advanced we are with driverless vehicles and the amount of AI and machine learning that's going on there, and it's active. So, we're quite advanced in some areas of practical AI tools, whereas it seems to be in other areas, we've still got a long way to go. Let's finish off with Greg and SY, I think, before we close off for final comments, and welcome questions from the audience if you've got anything specific. But Greg, just how all that resonates with you, it's a big body of work. How would a AI Institute of Safety actually operate? How large would you imagine that to be, and the different skill sets that you would require?
Yeah, for sure. Let me jump in with a few points. I think the conversation that you and Lana were having about human in the loop there was super interesting. I think we all should have a bit of an alarm bell that signs in the back of our brain when we hear someone talking about human in the loop as sort of a solution. It might have a solution temporarily and in some places, but as people are saying, as AI becomes more capable, imagine being the human in a loop with an AI chessbot, right? This would be the most soul-destroying job conceivable, and completely ineffective, right? So I think human in the loop, sometimes maybe, but this is not an enduring solution to AI safety in almost any field. I'd also want to build on what Mahendra was saying about where the industry opportunities lie. So one of the things that I've seen is interesting in the regulatory space is this new Californian bill, SB 1047, that puts obligations on AI developers to ensure that their models reach certain safety requirements. But it also does a thing where it says those developers have to empower third-party auditors to be able to provide independent verification of what they have said their systems can do. So this could create a really big industry, which you could tap into in Australia to be able to verify these audits. So I think that's maybe something that people on this call or people who are listening might be really interested in thinking about a place for their business. And there was also a point that Mahendra made about global fairness here, right? So if California regulates AI being deployed there, does this create asymmetry between American AI and Chinese AI, other countries? I think there's something we in Australia can do to address that. So if we in Australia said all AI deployed in Australia has to meet a certain safety standard, so the Californian safety standard, then that would, and if other countries follow us in doing that, that would mean that all countries developing AI that want it to be deployed for economic good have to meet that standard. And then we can contribute to a global level playing field by setting a deployment standard here. But Chris, your question was about an AI Safety Institute. So yeah, I mean, it kind of, as we foreshadowed at the top, a bunch of countries, UK, Canada, US, Singapore, Japan, Korea, are sort of looking at these AI Safety Institutes and building a network for them to share information with one another. So there's sort of a few things that they're doing, they're assessing the capabilities of these frontier models and sharing those assessments with one another, which is helpful. Obviously, they're driving AI safety research. So they're trying to make sure the work that is happening in universities on safety is connected globally and connected with the problems that we're facing. And sort of partnering with one another globally to kind of make sure that this coordination is happening.
I think that's the only way it can work. It's a bit like the Office of the Information Safety Commissioner at the moment, trying to drive change within sort of the large corporates and within social media, and she's almost doing it on her own. Whereas if we do have sort of that international framework, has a bit more buying power, I suppose, is one of a better term. Okay, now we've only got 10 minutes to go. SY, in terms of the frameworks, maybe just an update, if you can, on what ISACA has released. Disclosure, I'm an ISACA member and CISA holder, but yeah, just anything new that's come out or anything we should watch out for as well within the ISACA framework. I know there is an AI auditing guidelines and the like.
Yep. So ISACA materials in terms of from AI side of things, we did a survey last year, and it kind of chime in with some of the things that Shannon has shared earlier as well, whereby it is better off for organizations to actually train up their, at least the experienced hires, or how they can use the AI properly in augmenting their jobs, because I think some of the findings from the survey done last year, surprisingly, there's only 15% of organizations that have AI policies in place, and that's kind of like flying blind, similar to how we look at shadow IT back then, where departments might be deploying IT systems without the group security team knowing about it, or the data privacy team knowing about it. And then in terms of some of it, the survey also touches about some of the common ways that AI is currently being used, which touches on increasing productivity, automating some of the daily repetitive tasks, and as well as helping to write some of the contents. So here about, I think it would touches on the potential leakages of data that some of the proprietary organization company data might be leaked out if they're using the public LLMs or Gen AIs out there. I think the other thing is that on top of the AI the survey done, there was this guide on having a Gen AI policy. Is a white paper that was published earlier this year, which for those that are hearing this might want to take a look at, because I think people may not know the machine learnings and the neural networks that we have discussed about, but I think everyone knows about ChatGPT and Claude and even the co-pilots. So having a Gen AI policy, I think, is quite crucial in terms of the current stage we are in the pervasive use of this technology in most organizations. Yeah.
Okay, well, look, there is a range of different. There's ISO 42001, which is the AI management standard?
Yep. AI management standard, yes.
Yeah, the AI management system, I beg your pardon, AIMS. That's 42001, 2023. We'll have some of the links in the show notes for this particular session, but it's effectively an AI, as you mentioned, AI policy, but also an AI impact assessment in terms of any organisation that is releasing that. Given the time, any closing comments, I think, from the panel? This session will be available, and we'll release this as one on our podcast as well. But yeah, closing session. Shannon, your research, I suppose, in cybersecurity, you feel that there's a lot more research to go, and how comfortable? I'm an optimistic pessimist in terms of where we're going. I think you've felt cause for concern from that research that you were doing?
Not really. I think I'm in the same boat as you, that I'm a user of the technologies. Like I said, I think the policy side, companies shouldn't swing too far to blocking everything. Like SY mentioned, I think some of those intellectual property decisions and things like that, like we have policies in place at Splunk and Cisco where we're not allowed to to do our internal code and other things like that with these public tools. I think still allowing people to make use of them is important because the bad guys are using them in the same way. So if you lock down, us people trying to defend the networks from using them, you're just going to negatively impact that crowd.
Yeah.
I think that things are moving so very, very fast that there definitely is more research involved. And I think trying to delve into the inner workings of these tools to then help that auditing perspective is definitely key. And hopefully we make more progress on that front.
Nice. Lana, I'll come to you. You've got a long career in front of you, no doubt. How long have you got to go in your PhD?
Around a year and a bit, hopefully.
Oh, that's not too bad. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
And how optimistic are you, or are you a bit pessimistic in terms of AI and where it's going?
I'd like to say I'm a realist, but I'd say part of my PhD is focusing on fail cases, and looking at where things might go wrong just to try to prevent those sorts of things. So I guess I'm exposed a little bit more to certain things, but look, I definitely can see a lot of applications, very specific applications that are probably tested for, and which I think algorithms can definitely make a good impact for lots of important areas of medicine and decision making, but it's all about how you go around it, I think.
Do you find that's different when we're talking about AI, cognitive AI versus machine learning? You feel that's the difference when it's quite specific? That's more of a machine learning application versus a cognitive AI acting autonomously?
Yeah, I mean, I think autonomous systems in general are a very sticky conversation to go to. I mean, at least in the medical sort of area. But I think as long as you are aware of where humans might have blind spots, and trying to, I guess, account for those rather than trying to do a human's job maybe in a slightly more mediocre manner, depending what the AI algorithm is. I think that's where the blind spots are really the best application at the moment, and trying to figure out what they are important as well.
That's a good takeaway for anyone developing AI tools, is find those blind spots. Mahendra, again, you're on the speaking circuit from what I see. What are you doing day to day, and what's your takeaway with AI? How do you feel, optimistic or pessimistic?
No, definitely optimistic. I think these both terms, responsible AI and safe AI, there is a synergy between AI and cybersecurity. It is AI for cybersecurity and cybersecurity for AI. And we came a long way, and we almost identify main risks, biases, autonomous related jobs, and all these human augmentation, like human ethics. And like over the last decade, like people gone through so many brainstorming across data, across cybersecurity, across AI. And it's true, like technology also fast evolving, and AI became a new threat landscape for the cybersecurity. But I believe eventually, like once we promote these responsible AI frameworks and regulatory safety frameworks, unlike other technologies, these governance and compliance, all we can achieve through these frameworks, and ultimately we can establish a good ethical AI and secure data practices.
I think you're right. It does sound like the legislation's coming through much faster than what it did with, say, with cybersecurity and the like. And I think we'll close off with Greg. How optimistic are you that you'll get an AI Safety Institute here in Australia? Have you had any good feedback or positive response to your call to action?
Yeah, I think it's definitely something that government is going to be considering. I mean, hopefully before the election, but maybe as an election commitment. I guess the final thought I'd leave people with is that the explicit goal of most of these large developers is to build artificial superintelligence, right? So we're just getting started potentially on this AI roller coaster. So let's see where it goes. And I think it's too early to call optimism or pessimism. It really depends on how this capability development goes.
Yeah, I've still got my policeman's hat on. There's always a bad guy out there looking to make things a lot worse. And sorry, closing comment from you, and any call to actions or something we should keep an eye out for from ISACA?
I used to go with this principle of trust but verify. But I think for some security, wearing my security hat, I think we have gone to the zero trust principle now. But for AI, I think we are still in this trust but verify mindset because of the prevalence of people using the types of AI, especially the Gen AI ones. So I think for organizations, they do need to have this mindset that for any AI that they're looking at, having this trust but verify kind of principles built into their implementation stage. Even after that, in terms of monitoring and testing, I think that will go a long way in lasting until the sand settle down. The dust settle down, and then you have a more matured kind of regulations across the world, or even some frameworks that we can actually have a gold standard to base on. And the last item would be having the I think human in the loop is actually a very still a very much needed approach now, given at this stage we still are not pretty much 100% or even close to 100% being confident of the output that we are getting from the AI systems.
Yeah, very much. Okay, look, thank you very much to our panel. Greg Sadler, CEO, Good Ancestors Policy, calling for an Australians for AI Safety Institute. SYGO there in KL, ISACA Emerging Trends Working Group and Head of Compliance with Advanced AI. Shannon Davis in Melbourne, Principal Security Strategist, Splunk Surge, and Dr. Mahendra Samarawikrama, Director of Centre for Sustainable AI, and Lana Tikhomarov, PhD candidate, Australian Institute of Machine Learning, there at Lot 14 in the University of Adelaide. Thank you so much to each of you. Very good discussion. This will be released as a podcast on our Cybersecurity Weekly podcast and MySecurity TV. Thank you very much to our sponsors, Curtin University, Security Exhibition and Conference, DAVCOR, and then our supporters, ASIAL, ASIS, and AIPIO. I'll see you later tonight for the virtual awards at 7 p.m. and then in Singapore next week. And for those in Sydney, very much following on from this particular session, AI and robotics is that forefront, and we see that in medtech as well. But as we mentioned, driverless cars and a whole range of industrial applications as well. Thank you very much for coming. We'll see you on our next episode. And as mentioned, this will be available in our Security and Risk Professional Insight series. I'll close the meeting, but thanks very much for joining us. And thank you very much, panel. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.